1. I work for a company in a warehouse. We have private property signs up everywhere. In the same general area is a trucking company, and there used to be a flooring company. The flooring company's building and signs are there, but they got evicted a while ago because of something unrelated but involving a baseball bat. My company doesn't have a uniform of any kind, however, they did provide us bright orange shirts for visibility because forklifts, with the company logo and name on the chest and back. I had walked into our back dock area where our dumpsters are to empty a trash can. Afterwards, a woman comes into the area and approached me. She was at this point trespassing. She started complaining that nobody was answering the door at the flooring company and that nobody was answering the phone. I told her I didn't work for the flooring company and couldn't answer any questions about them. She ignored that and started going into detail about what kind of carpet she ordered and continued asking questions about their services. Every time I tried to tell her that I didn't work for the flooring company and couldn't help her, she talked over me and ignored me. After a few minutes of her rambling, this entire interaction was maybe 5 minutes long, I finally raised my voice to be heard over her and told her that I can't help her. She is trespassing on private property, and if she's here for the flooring company, she needs to go over to their building and bother them. She immediately snapped and started screaming at me about how rude I was and how she would make sure they knew that I was disrespectful to her and rude to her and that she would be reporting me. During the rant, I walked away laughing and gave her a smile and a wave before entering my warehouse and letting several managers know what happened in case she came to any other door of the building. Dunno if she got anyone on the phone, but we saw her leave from their parking lot a bit later. I really hope she tries to complain to the flooring company about me, since she doesn't know my name, and I don't work for that company anyway. 2. I was returning home from a trip that I cut short due to a family health emergency. The flight was pleasant, but I was in a bad place mentally. I did what I usually do in situations like that and kept to myself, saying few words. I plugged in my headphones and started to listen to some podcast during the 2-hour flight. Over the sound of the podcast, I heard someone speaking loudly in a pretentious nasal voice, talking. I pulled out my earbuds and heard a guy arguing with a flight attendant about how he had asked for something several times but didn't get it. I didn't really care and tried to ignore him, but he kept going, asking the flight attendant for her name and telling her that the airline company must hear about it. I don't remember what he wanted, but it was some kind of drink they didn't have available for some reason. I returned to my podcast and raised the volume. 10 minutes later, by the podcast timer, he was still ranting in his annoyingly pretentious way about professionalism, respect, and giving customers what they want. I switched to some rock music to drown him out and saw the captain coming over to talk to him. He was flailing his arms around like spaghetti. My worry about my hospitalized grandmother gave way to anger, and I started fantasizing about all the different ways I would shut him up. The captain walked away with a frustrated look on his face, and the flight attendant started serving the other passengers and ignoring his attempts to stir up trouble. I think they got him some alternative drink which he never touched. We landed, and I put my earbuds away to get ready to leave. He was first in line by the airplane door, and I was right behind him. The door opened, and an airport security guard was standing there to escort him through the tube. I followed, and by the end of the tube, a higher-ranking guard was waiting for him. He stood, blocking the way out, and I saw that other passengers behind me were fed up with this guy who never shut up for more than half of the flight time. He was arguing about how terrible the crew and service was, and how he never had service this bad. He kept saying he needs to leave now because his family were waiting for him, or some similar reason. My anger was starting to boil. Should I shove him, bang my pulling bag into his leg, punch him in the back? Would everybody clap? I had to head straight to the hospital, and everyone behind me had places to go. I've heard many stories about people like him online across many different channels. Nobody would feel bad for them. But this wasn't only about them. It was about who I am and what kind of person I want to be. I took a couple of deep breaths to calm down. as he was telling the guards how to do their jobs, and with the most aggressive tone I could come up with. And, despite my stress and exhaustion, I cursed at him to get out of the way. That F-bomb was enough to stun him, since everyone else was following the code of conduct required by their jobs, and for the first time since I noticed him, he had nothing to say. The guards took advantage of this silence and started to move him away, hopefully to some back office where he will be delayed for a few hours. I left the airport and headed home for a quick shower and a change of clothes before going to the hospital. My thoughts kept going back to that entitled guy and how he thought he could be a pretentious and rude guy with people whose jobs require them to be polite. Politeness never works with them, and someone meeting someone who thinks they're scum is the wake-up call they deserve. 3. So there's this corner store by my place I'd go to probably once a week or two, and it had this buggy debit card reader that would never work at all. Insert chip, no response for the reader, ended up paying cash. Found out there's a fake card reader at checkout there, and last month I noticed 7 or 8 ATM withdrawals in amounts of $100 to $180, spaced anywhere from 2 days to a few weeks apart from one another, totaling around $1,250. I tend not to use the ATM too often, but when I do, I never take out more than $100. It's very clear this wasn't me. Don't worry about it, I think to myself. I bank with a massive institution who will certainly reimburse this. We'll call them Big Bank here for the sake of anonymity. So last month I called them, cancelled the card, filed the claim, and found out that they only cover a small window of time after the first charge. Ridiculous policy if you even slightly pick it apart. They end up filling the claim for $460. At the end, I'm told I'll have a message posted to my account electronically. This detail is important later. Within the next week. Sure enough, they denied the claim, saying their conclusion was that the transactions were actually approved by me. Obviously, I'm furious. Then today, I notice yet another fraudulent ATM withdrawal for this week for $170, with an older debit card I must have used at a corner store. On a day I'm certain I woke up, went to work, then came straight home without so much as seeing an ATM. Today I call Big Bank's fraud department, once at first, then several more times to make sure I understand their policy. 6-ish phone calls, several hours worth of claims hassle later. I've established that this bank has the most blatantly exploitative, if legal at all, policy of any sort I've heard for a while. If I claimed the debit card was lost, I would have gotten the money back. Their investigation led them to stating the charges were approved by me, which they say they are sure of because it was ATM transactions, and those require a physical debit card. At first I say, well, what if the chip was cloned with one of those fake debit card readers? But Big Bank said that's impossible. I ask what the ATM cameras show for the withdrawals, and they say they can't rely on those because technically a customer could have had someone else withdraw the money for them using their card and PIN number. At this point I was pretty blown away, but still thought I had them in checkmate. One of the charges happened while I was out of town for a week and a half on the other side of the country. I ask if I can be reimbursed if I prove I was not in the state when the withdrawal happened, and apparently my dad, a co-signer on the account, from whom knows how long ago, could have had a copy of the card. He does not and never has, which their records surely show. One of the Big Bank reps said there's nothing they can do about it right now. Another just muted the phone for a while repeating their policy again to me. A few just passed me off to other reps. The last 2 I spoke to had the same mandate. They said I'd have to find a fax machine to send them paper copies of documentation, receipts, airline tickets, etc., proving I had the physical card in a different state, just for them to even consider reviewing the odd claim, because their policy mandates they strictly keep track of this stuff on paper. Remember earlier when they sent me the investigation's conclusion electronically to my account's inbox? Yeah, me too. So I ask, if I give you all of that proving I was gone, will you consider looking at the other charges that happened before I was out of town, or even concede it is physically possible someone duped my card? One of them just paused and said,
"That's all anyone here can do for you. Have a good night."
and hung up immediately. Another repeated the fax instructions and said there's no one else to talk to about this until I prove I was gone for that transaction. Bottom line, for all non-lost card ATM claims, Big Bank relies on the assumption that it is impossible to steal chip information, and confidently denies these claims unless they get pressure from external parties, police, CFPB, etc. Big Bank doesn't trust cameras since the customer might secretly know the supposed fraudster. If a customer reported fraud knowing it was a legit charge, that in itself would be fraud. So Big Bank's policy, when a customer reports this, is effectively to accuse the customer of fraud first, then bank on their word against the customer's. In other words, the customer is guilty until proven innocent. 3 of Big Bank's representatives directly stated they refuse to address these issues because the phone calls are all recorded. It is extremely likely the company gets away with this nationwide too. After all, how often does someone happen to have proof of being out of state on the exact day a fraudulent ATM charge shows up? And what is enough proof? Evidently, they're out of luck if they can't prove it. Big Bank gets to decide what enough proof is, and that's just Big Bank's policy. 4. This made me super uncomfortable, and I have to tell this to everyone. I got so uncomfortable I cried. For context, I am 20 years old and I am on the autism spectrum. We don't know what I have, but we know I have something, so my brain works differently than others. I also have been working at McDonald's for 6 years now. This day started off great. Awesome, actually. I had tons of sleep and got into work on time after some lunch. I work the night shift, usually 3 to 10, but it's 2 to 10 today, and was put into first booth as usual. Nothing happens for the first 50 minutes, but at around 2:50, 10 minutes before my entitled coworker clocks out, he comes to the back, mocking me after I take an order.
"427.
I'm sorry?
Nothing."
And he starts to walk away. For some context, this guy messes around too much, and the jokes he does are not funny and just are not needed in a workplace. Think cringy and inappropriate, like sex jokes and mocking, stuff like that. Please don't do that, dude. I don't like that. He proceeds to mock me again.
"When are you out of the first window?"
I grumble and just let it slide. I have work to do and I don't see him for a while. I take an order. I think it's just a sweet tea, not too sure, and I look at the screen to pull up this order. While holding my hand out for the money, something simple, I feel something soft. I look to them, and I see entitled coworker's dad looking at me, with my hand touching a dirty, filthy sock. It has poop on it, and it is a sock. Entitled coworker's dad has a dumb smirk on his face, and entitled coworker is laughing his butt off. And I turn around and immediately wash my hands. I have a blank face, but I'm dying inside. I walk back, take the money, and start to talk in a harsh tone. "Don't do that. Don't ever do that again." My coworker's dad says, "Dude, it's clean." "That doesn't matter. Please don't do that." Then the other manager comes in at the end, and there were mints in the first booth. She comes in, throwing the mints into the car, not knowing what just transpired.
"For you,"
points at entitled coworker's dad.
"and you."
Entitled coworker.
"Yeah, she should have one of those."
This line broke me. The fact his dad even handed me a sock thinking it was funny, and not even telling him not to say that, which clearly isn't a good thing to say. Dear God, that parent is so horrible. No wonder my coworker is so entitled. I hold out for a while, focusing on work and trying not to let it get to me, but eventually it was starting to get too much, and I call over my GM and tell her what happened. And she hears me and believes me in a heartbeat. I don't lie about things like this, and I don't like to cause trouble. And when I tell her what happened, it got to me. I broke down. I was so uncomfortable about holding a random sock. I had to sit down and take a small break, cry in the corner. The other manager eventually comes over and wonders what's wrong. She's mostly Spanish, so I use Google Translate to tell her what happened, and she also agrees with me that entitled coworker went too far. She tells everyone else what happened, and I get back to work. Nothing else happens, but what disturbs me the most is that my coworker's dad thought it was funny and a good idea to hand me that dirty sock. Just because it's clean doesn't matter. It's so disgusting. If it isn't obvious, I hate entitled coworker now. He went too far, and his jokes aren't funny. I just want them to stop. And if they don't, well, I know he's getting fired. My great manager told me that if he continues to tell her, so yay, it should stop now. I did tell my dad. He doesn't support me. He goes on and on about how he had it worse and how it's not the end of the world. When I needed him to get through my pain, he just pushes it away like it's nothing. Nothing. 5. This happened Wednesday, and is just so hilariously stupid to me I just had to share. You can be the judge of how stupid it is. Now I, a 34-year-old male, stated in a previous post that I worked with the famous Mart of Walls, but I had moved apartments between the setting of the previous post and now. That post was on this channel. Opting for the workout on the online grocery department over the constant barrage of customers wanting their cold cuts. Depending on the day, I'm either in the back to set up for the pickups and deliveries or putting the orders in the customers' vehicles, or out on the floor, picking the items for their orders. There are various commodities for paths ranging from the general merchandise to frozen, chilled, and dry groceries. At the time of this, I was just finishing up an ambient purchase path, and was busy putting the loose produce in produce bags, which some were then bagged further for the deliveries. I had just tossed a bunch of bananas into a bag, figuratively of course, can't bruise a customer's fruit, and turned around to grab another bag for the next order when I hear it. One of the many mating calls of the entitled species. I'm not entirely sure what it was, whether a throat clearing, a simple hey, or a quick excuse me, but it got my attention. And I turned back around. As I turned, I came face to face with the male of this species, and what a majestic Ken he was. Rawr. Probably not more than a few years older than myself, short beard and looking upset. This is where I say some form of greeting and say something along the lines of, "How can I help you?" But I didn't even get a word out before this man started complaining.
You know, not for nothing, but if you're going to sell plums, there should be bags by them.
Understandably confused and not really one for confrontation. I'm sorry?
When you sell stuff like that, there should be bags nearby. I don't want to go looking all around the place looking for one.
At this point, I took my time to look around the area to see where bags were. There were 2 dispensers on either side of the aisle the plums were in, nestled under some produce scales, but both were empty. There usually was a roll on the nearby banana display table as well, though I couldn't tell how full it was from my vantage point. 2 more dispensers hung on the overhang of the wet wall, where the cold produce was, both with bags in them, and of course, there was the dispenser I was literally standing next to, all within no more than 20 steps from the plums. This whole time, Ken was complaining about the inconvenience of bags not being directly next to the plums, wondering,
"What do you expect me to do, carry them one at a time?"
Sorry? Now, I would have turned this into an I don't work here lady minisode, using my default, I don't work in this department, but I can talk to who does and let them know the situation. It's not up to me to decide where the bags go. As I had already grabbed another bag for the loose produce item, I was in the process of opening it up with the intention of handing it to this man. But once again he interrupts me.
"It's too late now. I don't want the plums anymore. You lost a sale."
I was about to say, sorry, once again, but apparently I had a look that said, your refusal to purchase plums is not really tipping the scales in ways of hurting the store, but you do you. So once again, before I could utter a word, I'm interrupted yet again.
"You lost the sale. Well, you don't even care."
And he walked away. leaving me dumbfounded for a moment, trying to process, did he really say that? Yes, he really said that. The whole encounter lasted no more than a minute. Now I'm nervous for a moment, thinking about how to go get a manager, but then I thought, no, if he's not going to get plums because he has to walk 10 to 15 feet for a bag, that's on him, and went about my business. I did end up telling a produce associate, and they laughed at the audacity of this Ken. Sorry there's no dramatic, let me see your manager, no assault or police being called, no over-the-top shouting. Just a little story about a Ken who just wanted to complain because he's special. Yes, yes, you are. You're special. You're so special. Yes, you are. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Idiots in the Wild, episode 162. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please smack the like button a little bit and share the video with friends and family and guys named Bob. And if you'd like to get early access to these videos, get them on the Monday, support me on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description. You'll also find links in there to the Hellfreezer merchandise store on Teespring, and also a link to our Discord, where we're a very friendly bunch, and you can chat with each other when I'm not doing streams and things. And if you really enjoyed today's video, then please do leave a tip. You can do that by clicking on the heart with the $sign onto the video, but, and it's very important to note, you do not have to do that for me, and you do not have to do that for any YouTuber for any reason. But we do appreciate it. Well, I appreciate it. I can't speak for the rest. Okay. No other bits and bobs today, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. What is the decent knockoff of a name brand product you've come across lately? I'm naming this because when I'm done recording here, I'm going to get on my bike and cycle to a local store. My throat's a bit rough today. I need ice cream. But I did the other day have a very nice, it was Lidl's knockoff version of Ben & Jerry's fish food. And it was surprisingly nice, very chocolatey, caramelly and swirly and big chunky fish. So I was very happy to discover that, because I've had ice cream out of there before and it wasn't nice. So why don't you let me know what yours are in a comment below, if you would be so good. And before we go, let's have the answer of the day from a previous video. And today's answer comes from Idiots in the Wild, episode 132. And this was in relation to popular food things that you've just never tried. Mine was pumpkin spice. Although, since I have tried, it was an iced coffee thing. I took a sip out of it, didn't like it that much, it's still in the fridge. Maybe if I got something from Starbucks, I'd like it. I do have a Starbucks nearby, I've just not been to it yet. Saving that for the summer to get an iced coffee or something. Today's answer comes from, I apologize in advance if I get this wrong, Kaze Rio Tre. Never go out of my way to try sweet potato pie. Never had that either. I understand that it's good, but that I'm not running towards it. If I'm offered and I can't refuse, sure, I'll try it. I want sweet potato pie now. I have no idea if it would be good or not, but sweet potato pie. It's just fun to say. Thank you for your answer, Kaze. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.